Thanks for saying that. Okay, we're broadcasting on YouTube and we're broadcasting on Zoom. I'm just going to get Facebook set up and we're going to get going. One of our laptops had a meltdown. It's a good thing we have backup plans. Okay, we are going live on Facebook. We're going. We are live on Facebook as well. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to try one more share here and we'll see what happens if I can log in. Otherwise, we will do without. Okay, we're not gonna share it on the other Facebook. We'll deal with that later. In the meantime, we're gonna get going here. Okay, whoever's here is here, and we'll share it later with those that aren't. We are going to open our Chumash today to page 336. Just a public service announcement for those that don't know. God willing, Saturday night we're going to have a movie night. The movie is called Marathon Mom. It is a very, very interesting story, very unusual story. And if you'd like to join, we'll be here in Bozeman. And when we're not on live camera, I will tell you where it will be happening, and I'll give you the address. And it's going to be a wonderful Havdalah followed by a movie night. And so get a babysitter. If you have kids, get a spouse sitter if you have a spouse who doesn't want to come. And come enjoy a wonderful night together with your brothers and sisters in the Jewish community. Page 336, we're in the book of Shmos, the book of Exodus. Last Shabbos we did Chazak, in this Chazak we wrapped up the book of Genesis and the portion of Vayechi, and now we are with the Jewish people in what is going to be known as the Egyptian exile. And for the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 3.5 Torah portions, we're going to be in the exile and the process of getting out of the exile, out of the Egyptian exile. Right here in the beginning, in the third reading, the third Aliyah, we have a little insight into Moses' life in the period of time between his birth and when he runs away from Egypt and eventually comes back as a leader. So let's read the story inside, and then we're gonna really tackle it from a bunch of. It's literally like 4 verses. Verse 11. It was in those days that Moses grew up, and he went out to his brothers, and he saw their burdens. So Moshe is now 20 years old. He grew up in the palace. He was adopted by Bitya, or some people call her Batya, but her name in the Medrash is Bitya. Pharaoh's daughter adopted him. He's raised in Pharaoh's palace, even though he's nursed by his mother Yocheved, who nurses him because Miriam recommends to Batya that she knows a Jewish woman who can nurse him, because he refused to nurse him, a non-Jewish woman. He grows up in the palace. He comes and he's watching as his people are being tormented. He saw an Egyptian man strike a Hebrew man, one of his brothers. He turned this way and that way, and he saw that no man was there, so he struck the Egyptian and he hit him in the sand. So he kills him and buries him. The first indication we have of what it means to be a Jewish leader, it means when you see a Jewish person suffering, being abused, being tormented, you don't sit around in your ivory tower giving ideas. You show up and you defend your brothers and sisters. You look around, you make sure you don't get caught. I mean, at least to the best of your ability. And he takes out the Egyptian, he kills him, he buries him, he kills him and buries him. He doesn't murder him. Murder is always prohibited. He kills him. No second degree. He kills him. That's in self-defense, there's no issue with that. He went out on the second day. Now comes the next morning. He goes out, and look, two Hebrew men were quarreling. So you had Dasan and Aviram, the two famous troublemakers, fighting. So he goes out and he sees them fighting, and he says to the wicked one, Lama Sakariyacha, why would you strike your friend? Rashi tells us he hadn't actually struck his friend. He had his hand up like this, ready to smack, just by lifting his hand. And Moshe said that's already considered wicked, just by lifting your hand on a fellow person. So the man replies, who made you a man, a prince, and a judge over us? Who hired you to be the big macher over here? Do you plan to slay me as you have slain the Egyptian? Moses became frightened, the verse says, and said, indeed, the matter has become known. Pharaoh heard of the incident and attempted to kill Moses. Moses fled from Pharaoh and he settled in the land of Midian. He sat by the well, and that's where Moshe moves to Midian. And he spends the next 60 years away from the Jewish people in Midian. He marries Zipporah. They have two sons, Gershom and Eliezer. And it's only 60 years later that God speaks to him at the burning bush, which we read about in this week's Torah portion as well, where God says, I want you to go redeem the Jewish people from Egypt. So he kills the Egyptian. The part that I want to focus on is the second half of the story. That, first of all, it says he was scared because it became known, because these two troublemakers, Dasan and Aviram, were talking about how he had killed the Egyptian. And it says literally, the verse says he became scared. Second is where it says, that Pharaoh found out about the incident and how that played out. Someone here? Is them leaving? Yeah, it's still them. It's the two guys in the truck. Yeah. So now let's tackle this story from a very, very fascinating, and I mean fascinating perspective, that is both going to, from the Rebbe's teachings, that's both going to deal with the issue of trust in God and how it plays out in this story, and secondly, how it relates to the terrible sin of gossiping and lashon hara, speaking negatively about others. And it's really, in some level, it's connected to each other. So it's a very, very, the first half of what I'm going to share is from a talk that in the Chabad world, at least, it's a very popular, powerful, popular, and so hard to internalize. A talk from the Rebbe about bitachon, about trust in God. And it goes something like this. If you look at Rashi, Rashi says that Moshe was scared and he said, everyone found out about it. Right? So first Rashi says, Kipshutai, which means the understanding of this verse is literal, meaning Moshe was literally afraid. Not theoretically, not spiritually. He was literally afraid, the fact that everyone knew that he had killed the Egyptian. Afraid of what? That he'll pay the consequence for it. Then Rashi goes on to a whole separate explanation about that says that Moses saw that there are gossipers amongst the Jewish people, nasty gossipers that are literally talking about, they know that he defended the Jew by killing the Egyptian. but they're using it as a form of gossip and knowing that it could put his life in danger. He said, maybe indeed the Jews are not worthy of redemption. I always wondered, the Rashi quotes from the Medrash, Moshe always wondered, what was the Jewish people's sin more than all the other 70 nations in the world that they deserve to be suffering so much with enslavement, right? What are they being punished for? For being bad? Why is not everyone else being punished? Are they the worst? But he says, now I see that how gossipy they are. Maybe they are worth the punishment. So Rashi first says that he was scared literally, but then gives us a second interpretation that maybe he wasn't literally scared. He was scared. He was shocked when he discovered that the Jewish people perhaps may be worth the punishment that they are experiencing because they are gossipers. So I want to tackle the first half first, and then we'll tackle the gossiping second. The Rebbe asked the following question. Why does the Torah tell us that Moshe was scared? Why do we need to know that? It could say that Moshe killed the Egyptian. He intervened when he saw two Jews fighting. They said, oh, you're going to kill us like you killed the Egyptian? Then Moshe leaves town. He gets out of town. Why did the Torah need to emphasize for us in the biblical verse, Vayira Moshe, that Moshe was scared? Because the truth is, his being scared isn't what got him out of Egypt. It wasn't until Pharaoh tried to kill him that he ran away. So why is the Torah telling us that he was specifically that he was scared? Go ahead. Obviously.
No, to the murder.
Obviously.
Oh, okay.
You could do your best, but if people are talking about it, I mean, somebody saw it. It only happened the day before.
Well, maybe that's why he was afraid.
Again, but why does the Torah? We're not questioning why he was afraid. The question is why does the Torah need to tell us that he was afraid? And you could say, well, maybe he wasn't exactly afraid, which is why Rashi brought the second interpretation. But that doesn't take away the most basic understanding that he was literally afraid, and the Torah tells us he was afraid. And it isn't necessarily to tell us that's why he ran away, because he only ran away after the Pharaoh got involved. It wasn't about the fact that people were just talking about it that made him, he was genuinely scared. So here's where the Rebbe comes up with this. It's not as, maybe he explains it in a novel way, but it's based on fundamentals of Judaism, the principles of Jewish faith, and the principles of Chassidus. And he says as follows: there's a direct correlation between Moses' fear and what happened later, and with what happened later. What happened later? Pharaoh heard about it and wanted to kill Moshe. So much so that the Medrash, Rashi quotes the Medrash, that the executioner tried to kill him, and God made Moses' neck be hard like a rock, and he couldn't kill him. In other words, there's a direct correlation between Moses being scared about the fact that they were talking about him killing the Egyptian and the fact that Pharaoh tried to kill him. And here's where it gets crazy. If Moses would have had 100% bitachon, 100% complete trust that no negativity would befall him, that no harm would befall him, and he would have not been scared, so what? So Dasan and Aviram said that you killed the Egyptian. You're Moses. You trust in God. If you trust in God, you know that nothing can happen to you without God being in full control. So what are you scared of? Says the Rebbe that had he had that trust, then the trust itself would make the issue go away. He would never have to leave Mitzrayim. He would never have to run away from Egypt. Pharaoh would have never threatened him. It was a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because he was scared and didn't put his trust in God, so now automatically the rain, you're not trusting in God, right? You're scared, which means you're putting yourself under the jurisdiction of nature. Under the jurisdiction of nature, Pharaoh has power. Pharaoh finds out now, he comes to kill you. Now you have to run away. Because Moshe didn't have complete trust in God, and he was actually scared, which, by the way, it seems like Moshe didn't only think about it in his head. It says, Vayira Moshe, Moshe was scared, and he said, he verbally said, oh, it's now public knowledge. So he didn't only think about his fear in his head, he spoke about it, which means he's expressing to somebody his lack of faith and trust in God. Especially when you're speaking, because we know the power of speech is so strong in Judaism. We have to be so careful with what comes out of our mouth because we're manifesting realities. So not only was he scared internally, but he manifested his fear. So now you become a deliverer of your self-fulfilling prophecy. And that's why Pharaoh was able to come after him. So the Torah is telling us, you want to know the truth. Moshe lacked trust. And because he lacked trust, he paid for it with actual trouble that befell him as a result. And that's how powerful bitachon, trust in Hashem is. That actually having the bitachon, the trust in itself, creates a reality in which things end up positively. You know, there's a famous statement that maybe you've heard if you hung around here long enough from the Tzemach Tzedek and the third Chabad Rebbe. It's trach good vet zayin good. Think good and it will be good. In other words, when you actually think of things in a positive way, right? Today everyone's into it. Manifest. You should manifest. Oh, yeah, very good. Good morning, America. Tzemach Tzedek was 200 plus years ago. And this idea of manifesting a truth, which comes from trust in Hashem, which is based on Sefer Ikarim and other Jewish philosophy books. And by the way, it works the other way around as well. There's a Gemara says, in Brachas, in the first tractate of the Talmud, I want to read to you straight from the Talmud. I took it out, Samach Hamad Aleph. It says, Yisurim right here. We're going to the source. Hang tight. Oh, right here. You guys are very patient, but I want to give you the source straight from the holy book. Just want to find the suffering section. It's about suffering. We're looking for the suffering. Oh, it says like this: Yehuda, this Bar Nassim, was going along, following after Rav Hamnuna. So Rabbi Yehuda Bar Nassim, a sage, was walking behind Rav Hamnuna. Yehuda Bar Nassim sighed. Rav Hamnuna told him, "The person, you, wants to bring suffering upon himself. As it's written, for my sigh ushers in my meal, my groan pours forth like water, because I feared a fright, and it has overtaken me. What I dreaded has come upon me." In other words, the Gemara says that if you're going to kvetch all day and you're going to constantly be sighing about, oh my gosh, everything, that's going to be the reality. Maybe that's the reason so many of my flights are delayed, because I'm always so scared they're going to be delayed. It actually makes, not maybe, I'm almost certain that's what it is. The Maharal, the great Rabbi Yehuda Loy, the Maharal of Prague, explains that the fear that you're going to suffer actually brings the suffering. Where's your bitachon? Where's your trust? So Moshe Rabbeinu, the greatest leader of the Jewish people to ever live, as great as he was, he had a moment where he could have showed up with a total manifestation of trust in God, with no questions, with no fear. And that would have actually, that trust in itself would have brought about the ultimate blessing, which is that he would never have to run away, because Pharaoh would never come after him, and he would have stayed in Egypt. But because he was scared, he created his own reality. And I don't want anyone to be fooled here for a moment. Bitachon in God, trust, total trust in God with no fear, is a very, very hard thing to attain. Right? It's not a novelty when everything's going great. It doesn't take much to have bitachon. But when your bank account is empty, and then the one thing you have, which is your car, on the same day that your bank account is empty, you don't know how you're going to pay your mortgage, and now you're at the side of the road, and you're changing your tire because the tire blew out, and then you get back in your car after changing the tire, and you get to your home and pull into your driveway to find out that your boss just fired you. And obviously I'm giving a very severe example, and yet you're Zen. God is running the show. There are people like that. I actually asked my therapist once, do you ever meet people that are genuinely Zen? And the answer was yes, but it's a very rare commodity. And you can't choose to be Zen just in the moment that it gets hard. You have to build in your system that type of manifestation. To be able to say, Gam Zula Tova, to say this is also for the good, even when it doesn't feel that way. But it's an incredible thing. And Moshe Rabbeinu failed at it, but the reason the Torah tells us about it is because we can do better with it. We all need boosting in our trust in God. It is so tiring to hear people, and I guess the reason it bothers me is because it reminds me of my struggles with trust, but I hear it normally from the outside. Rabbi, what's going to be with the anti-Semites in America? What's going to be with Iran? What's going to be with Syria? What's going to be with Turkey? What's going to be with this? What's going to be with Trump? What's going to be with Obama? What's going to be with Minnesota? What's going to be a whole day with what's going to be, what's going to be? What do you mean what's going to be? It's going to be exactly as Hashem planned it to be. But that's a hard move. And it's hard when it's not just a collective reality, it's your personal struggle. And Yechavi is a good example of someone who lives with trust in God. And unfortunately for me, I'm married to her, so it's constantly showing to me what it's meant to look like, where you're living with that trust in Hashem, even when things are not turning out as you'd like. So that's sort of the first part of Rashi. Rashi's saying, listen, we got to think of it literally. Moshe failed in his trust in God, and it cost him immensely. We should be super careful to have incredible trust in God, because the trust in itself will manifest a positive reality. But then there's a second half of Rashi, which talks about the Jewish people being gossipers. And Moshe saying, woo, now I realized I'm scared, not scared of my own death, not scared of being caught. I'm scared for the Jewish people, because now that I see that they have gossipers amongst them, which is one of the worst evils. Gossip is a disgusting, evil trait where people spend time talking about other people when it has no relevant effect to them whatsoever. If they're sitting here and they're willing to throw me under the bus by gossiping, maybe that's why they're suffering so much in Egypt. So the Rebbe looks at that part of Rashi and has three questions. Number one, we know from the Talmud and from the Medrash that amongst the Jews, there were idolaters in Egypt. There was a lot bigger sins than gossiping. Why would Moses pick on gossiping as the sin that makes them worthy of being in exile, when literally they were doing things way worse than gossiping, like idolatry? From Rashi, it makes it sound like Moshe saying, you know what, if they're gossipers, maybe they do deserve exile. But seriously, gossiping, not idolatry, not all the other sins? Number two, if you look at Rashi carefully, there's two separate conversations. The beginning, Rashi says, maybe they're not worthy of, that Moses said, maybe they're not worthy of redemption. But the end of Rashi says, maybe they're worthy of the suffering of the enslavement. Not being worthy of redemption and then being worthy of suffering is not the same. Not being redeemed doesn't mean you need to suffer. And yet Rashi in the beginning says one, and the end says another. And number three, Moses asked the question. He said, could it be that the Jewish people are more sinful than all the other 70 nations in the world for why they deserve such enslavement? What's the actual answer? Are we? Are we really worse than everyone else? We're the Jews. And we've got our problems, but I mean, are we worse than, I don't want to list names of specific nations and countries, but use your own imagination. Of all the troublesome nations in the world, are the Jews really the worst? So the Rebbe assesses this Rashi and gives us a wonderful insight. He says like this, all the other sins, including idolatry, that the Jewish people committed while they were in Egypt, did not stop God from wanting to redeem them. Why? God was not redeeming the Jewish people because they deserved it. They didn't deserve it. He redeemed them because he chose them to be his nation, despite their flaws, despite their sins. And there was no logic to it. It wasn't like when you looked at the Jews in Egypt, you said, ooh, these guys look great compared. No, they were beaten. They were spiritually a spiritual disaster. But God made a decision that that's his nation, that the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are going to be the nation of Israel that are going to get the Torah. And so the fact that they were idolaters and adulterers and God knows what else would not stop God from taking them out, because God was not taking them out of Egypt due to their positive behavior. He was taking them out of Egypt despite their negative behavior, because he chose them, and choosing is from his essence. You don't ask questions. I chose. You ever see couples and you ask yourself, what in the world are they doing as a couple? They look like apples and oranges. Or you say to yourself, what does the person see in that woman? Or what does that woman see in that guy? Does she not see that he's ugly? Mm-hmm. Does she not see what I see? Does he not see what I see? Does he not see that a 450-pound obese? Love is love. It's not logical. It has to come from the core, from the essence. When God chose the Jewish people, we were the definition of ugly. We were the definition of a disaster. We were dysfunctional. We were idolatrous. We were ungrateful. We were nasty. God said, you're my people. I'm coming to choose you. So the fact that there were worse sins are not relevant to this part of the conversation. But that's where Lashon Hara, speaking bad about others, really comes into play. God chose, by his own choice, God chose to take the nation of Israel out of Egypt. The problem is, Moshe looked at this nation, he said, oh, boy, we got a big problem. God wanted to take the nation of Israel out of Egypt. But if they're not a nation because they're gossiping about each other, if they're divided, then maybe God is not going to redeem them altogether. Maybe they're not worthy of the redemption. If the redemption is supposed to be a wholesome organism, a wholesome organic group called Jews, or called Hebrews, or called Israelites, then he's only going to take them out as a group. When Moshe saw that they're gossiping and talking negatively about him killing the Egyptian, which was an indication of how they talk in general, that they have this problem with gossiping and Lashon Hara, talking negatively. He says, oh my gosh, they're dividing. They're divided. And if they're divided, maybe they are not worthy, because God only wants to take a united nation of Jews out of Egypt, not a broken, fragmented group of people who are busy bickering and killing each other. And now we can understand what Moshe said in the second half of Rashi. Moses knew that eventually the redemption would come, but he said maybe they're not worthy of being taken out right now. Why? Because they're gossipers. They're divided. They're not a united front. So he said maybe God is punishing them with harsh enslavement, right? To break them. What happens when you break a people? When you work them hard enough? The Jewish people are good examples of that. When you break people hard enough, they don't have time to talk about gossip, right? The black slaves being beaten were not gossiping. They were trying to survive, get some sleep, escape their masters, not get beaten another time. So Moses says to himself, now that I sinned, but I know that God is eventually going to take them out, which is probably why, even though they're not the worst of the 70 nations, but that's probably why they are paying such a harsh price in the enslavement, because what happens when you break them? There's no more ego. Beaten people, tormented people, tortured people, enslaved people don't have an ego. And if they don't have an ego, what makes people gossip? What makes people speak Lashon Hara? Ego. Well, for sure, free time. Why would anyone spend time talking about another individual's life? Ask yourself, why is someone else's life having a bad time in their own? They're jealous, or they see something in someone else that reminds them of who they are, so they have to talk about them. There's nothing about character refinement. There's nothing about goodness. There's nothing that enhances someone's marriage, their work ethic, their relationship with God, their relationship with their family, by talking about other people's lives. Sometimes they even do it just to feel good about themselves, to put down someone else. You heard? That couple's having woohoo, they're having a divorce. Woohoo. You should hear the fireworks. Woohoo, that couple. That guy, he stole from his boss. Woohoo. That boss is going to take him to court and whoa, he has no idea what's coming down the pipe. Gossip is a disease that fragments and divides societies and definitely plagues the Jewish people. Moshe said to himself, I see there's gossipers, I see they're speaking Lashon Hara. I don't want them to suffer, but maybe the reason they're suffering is because God eventually is going to redeem them. And the only way you can redeem them is if they're a wholesome nation. And the only way they're going to be wholesome is if they remove their ego, so they're not bashing each other. And the only way to remove their ego is by breaking them. Moshe wasn't saying they deserve it as a punishment, right? Because the punishment for Lashon Hara, for speaking negatively or gossiping, is not 210 years of enslavement. What Moshe was saying is that they were worthy of it, that in order of them, because they're going to suffer in the enslavement, they'll be broken enough, and that will prepare them for the actual redemption. Which is interesting, because there's another medrash that says in Vayikra Rabbah, it says that one of the reasons the Jews merited to be redeemed, right? This is 60 years prior, right? It was only 60 years later, Moshe comes back and leads the Jewish people out of Egypt. What does it say in the medrash about the redemption? Very fascinating. And the Rebbe quotes the medrash. The medrash says that one of the reasons the Jews merited to be redeemed is because they did not speak negatively about each other. They did not speak negatively about each other, which means it worked. The enslavement broke them enough that there was no ego. And when there is no ego, you don't talk and bash other people. And therefore, they didn't merit the redemption as Moshe predicted. He predicted it 60 years earlier that perhaps, the only way they'll eventually get out of here, which I know God is going to do for them, is when they become a nation again. And the only way to become a nation is to be united, is when they stop dividing each other with gossip. How do you make sure they don't gossip? You bust up their ego. How do you bust up their ego? Give them enslavement. Huh? And they were beaten equally. And I think it's such a...
So by the time he came back, they were beaten and...
Oh, for sure. There's another 60 years, some of the harshest years of slavery with it. But I mean, obviously, it goes to show us how powerful and the negatively powerful gossiping in Lashon Hara is. But it also gives us an incredible reminder of where gossip comes from. And I think each of us can assess in ourselves, whenever we're talking about someone else in a negative way, it never comes from something good. I'm not talking about someone who's speaking to their spouse about something they need to reconcile, or speaking to their boss. I'm talking about when you're talking to a third party about someone else where it's not relevant to your life whatsoever. It's disgusting. It's un-Jewish. It's unethical. It's immoral. And it divides societies to the point where God needs to create a reality that our egos should be put in their place, so we won't be doing it. Because there is no reason to gossip if it's not for ego. Everyone will use excuses. Oh, for holy reasons. No one gossips for holy reasons. No one talks about another person for holy reasons. Did you hear? They went on a vacation and must have cost, I mean, who asked you to assess the finances of the vacation? Did they take the money from you? Did they assess your vacation? Did they assess other things in your life? Do we really want to live in a world where everyone's assessing everyone else's life with minimal information and just purely gossiping? I can't believe he married that person. Again, if it's relevant to you, let's say it's your own brother or your own child and you could be influential, but just randomly. You heard? Angelina Jolie broke up with whoever. Why? What are you talking about? Like who cares? You ever go by the checkout on the checkout counter? You have all those magazines. This one broke up. This one got married. This one got married again to the one they broke up from yesterday. Who cares? There's a whole industry. of gossip, and we've got suckered into it. Now you have TMZ. Every 4 seconds, a guy trips on a staircase, and there's a photographer standing to take a picture of it. Klopped, or he's falling down the staircase. What kind of world is that? Is that a world we want to? First of all, definitely not a godly world, but is that really a world and a society that we want to live in, where we seek to divide people based on things that are not relevant to our lives? And that's such an important lesson that the Torah is emphasizing, both on the gossip front and the ego that leads to the gossip. That sometimes God needs to break that ego for you. And that really brings back to the bitachon part, to the trust in God part. Right? Because what happens normally when something breaks in our life? Randy actually sent me a video this morning of a rabbi on Instagram, and I actually shared it with Chavi. It was very powerful. He said, there's two types of people. I'm going to paraphrase because he did it way better. He probably had a good teleprompter. I don't. There's two types of people and how they deal with challenges. Either you see a challenge like a threat to your existence, and then you need to fight back against it, and you bemoan it, and it's there to destroy you. And you know what it will do if you think it's there to destroy you? It's going to destroy you. Self-fulfilling prophecy. But when you realize that if you are blessed enough to realize that the challenge that you're experiencing was gifted to you by God to bring out something in you to make you better, then you don't see it as a threat. You don't see it as the world coming to an end. You see it as something that's going to it's going to uplift you to places you could have never imagined. So next time, each of us personally, don't ever tell this to someone else, but when you're experiencing an incredible challenge or you feel like you're suffering, ask yourself, number one, what is God trying to say? What message is God sending to me? And B, who knows? Maybe God's just doing it to break my ego. Because right now I'm not a vessel for any blessing because I'm so haughty. Right? There's no room for God to come in. It's all about me, 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 me. I, iPhone, iPad, iTouch, I. It's America. It's all about the I. So we need God to come back into your life. He wants to come into your life. He wants to bless you. He can't. There's no room for him. So he breaks the ego. He doesn't have to give you Egyptian slavery, but he can give you a minuscule amount. And now you're less egocentric and there's more room for the blessing because there's more room for anything but yourself. The difference between the word soil and soul I've shared before. In the English language, the word soil and soul is spelled the same. There's only one letter difference. I and you. When you live a life devoted to you, to someone else, to the betterment of the world, it's soulful. When it's I, it's soil. Egocentricity, bordering on narcissism. I love when people say, Rabbi, this and this politician is such a narcissist. Why does it bother you so much? Anyway, it's true. There's quite a few of them. Some are better at narcissism than others. But why does it bother you so much? I'll tell you why. You'd like to know why? Because you see a little bit of yourself in that politician. There's a little narcissist within yourself. You're just a little jealous that that politician takes their narcissism all the way. You wish you could, but you can't because you don't have that power. So you're stuck with being a narcissist in your crawl space. It's not fun to be a narcissist in your crawl space. It's way more fun to be a narcissist on television, on Twitter, on Facebook, on Truth Social. So next time you see negative in someone else, pause for 10 seconds and ask yourself, why is that bothering me? And chances are, it's bothering you not for altruistic reasons. You don't really care about immigrants. I've had this conversation. There are a few people that care about immigrants. Most of the people who claim they care about immigrants, they don't even care about their mother-in-law. Why would they care about immigrants? Oh my gosh, look what they're doing to the immigrants. What did you do to your sister-in-law at Thanksgiving? What are you talking to me about immigrants? Mr. Holy Nice person. You're not so nice. It's your own agenda. It's your own ego. It's your own whatever. And the quicker we're honest about it, the quicker we heal and we become a receptacle for divine blessing. So it's both the trust that God is running the show and the ability to remove our ego and not gossip about others, because there's nothing to gain in our relationship with anyone, God included, by chatting about others. And that's our dose of Torah for tonight. Be a mensch, be trustworthy, trust God. Don't gossip and come to movie night. If you didn't tell me you're coming to movie night, come to movie night and tell me you're coming. You hear, Mitchell? Don't give me no Baba Mises. There's movie night Saturday night. We'll see you then. Sei gesund. And we'll see you